Check, 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 check. All right, guys. So we're going to read this article by the Gray Zone. It's written by Max Blumenthal with Anya Parampil. Parampil. Max Blumenthal and Anya Parampil. Parampil. It was published September 12th, 2025. That was 4 days ago. This is on the Gray Zone. So this is the article. It's titled Charlie Kirk Refused Netanyahu Funding Offer, Was Frightened by Pro-Israel Forces Before Death, Friend Reveals. So we're reading it word for word. A Trump insider and longtime friend of Charlie Kirk tells the Gray Zone how the assassinated conservative leader's turning point on Israeli influence provoked a private backlash from Netanyahu's allies that left him angry and afraid. So, a Trump insider and a longtime friend of Charlie Kirk tells the Gray Zone how Charlie Kirk's turning point on Israeli influence provoked a private backlash from Netanyahu's allies that left him angry and afraid. I've watched recently what Candace Owens put out. She has a little bit of insight to this private meeting in the Hamptons with this gentleman who is an American Israeli billionaire. I forgot his name, but it might be mentioned in here, and I'll get back to it if I. But supposedly, this gentleman aggressively approached Charlie Kirk and was upset for having, I guess, anti Zionist American individuals with prominence and with a platform, such as a Candace Owens, such as that comedian who's been on the podcast, Joe Rogan's podcast, many times. I forgot his name. His face is in my memory right now. It's like I can envision his face. I forgot his name. As well as Tucker Carlson. And it's a very intriguing debate. I don't know if it was a couple months ago, almost a year ago. It was on the Turning Point USA. They put on an event, and this gentleman, like I said, he's American. He's of Jewish. He's a Jewish American. I forgot his name. He's a comedian. He has his own podcast. He's very popular. But he had a debate with this pro-Zionist, pro-Israeli American, and this individual just demolished the pro-Israeli American with facts, and it was on full display. And Charlie Kirk was mediating it. He was a mediator, and it didn't look too good for those who are for the relationship between Israel and America, and the Israeli influence and the lobbying and trying to control America and how we handle Israeli business. And so that was what this article is referring to. Charlie Kirk's turning point on Israeli influence provoked a private backlash from Netanyahu's allies that left them angry and afraid. The source said anxiety spread within the Trump administration after an apparent Israeli spying operation was uncovered. So this source, who was part of the MAGA movement, but also a friend of Charlie Kirk, said anxiety spread within the Trump administration after an apparent Israeli spying operation was uncovered. Charlie Kirk rejected an offer earlier this year from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to arrange a massive new infusion of Zionist money into his Turning Point USA, TPUSA organization, America's largest conservative youth association, according to a longtime friend of the slain commentator speaking on the condition of anonymity. So this source is remaining anonymous. The source told the Gray Zone that the late pro-Trump influencer believed Netanyahu was trying to cow him into silence as he began to publicly question Israel's overwhelming influence on Washington or in Washington, and demanded more space to criticize Israeli and their influence in our American government. In the weeks leading up to his September 10 assassination, Kirk had come to loathe the Israeli leader, regarding him as a bully. The source said Kirk was disgusted by what he witnessed inside the Trump administration, where Netanyahu sought to personally dictate the president's personnel decisions and weaponized Israeli assets like billionaire donor Miriam Adelson to keep the White House firmly under its thumb. Israeli assets like billionaire donor Miriam Adelson. So they use their money for our government. They influence our government's decision making to benefit their government, to benefit their country, their agenda. That's what this article is saying. According to Kirk's friend, who also enjoyed access to President Donald Trump and his inner circle, Kirk strongly warned Trump last June against bombing Iran on Israel's behalf. That should be highlighted right there. So, according to this anonymous resource, who was Kirk's friend and also enjoyed access to President Donald Trump and his inner circle, tells Blumenthal that Kirk strongly warned Trump last June against bombing Iran on Israel's behalf. Charlie was the only person who did that, they said, recalling how Trump barked at him in response and angrily shut down the conversation. The source believes the incident confirmed in Kirk's mind that the President of the United States had fallen under the control of a malign foreign power, a malignant, a bad foreign power. That's what these words are saying. Damn, this is kind of sad that the Trump administration. Okay, so Trump barked at Charlie Kirk. He barked at him in quotes in response and angrily shut down the conversation. The source believes the incident confirmed in Kirk's mind that the President of the United States had fallen under the control of a malign foreign power and was leading his own country into a series of disastrous conflicts. By the following month, Kirk had become the target of a sustained private campaign of intimidation and free-floating fury by wealthy and powerful allies of Netanyahu, figures he described in an interview as Jewish leaders and stakeholders. He was afraid of them, the source emphasized. At TPUSA, Turning Point USA, the rift with Israel widens. Kirk was 18 years old when he launched the TPUSA in 2012. From its inception, his career was propelled by Zionist donors who showered his young organization with money through neoconservative outfits like the David Horowitz Freedom Center. He repaid his wealthy backers over the years by unleashing a relentless firehouse of anti-Palestinian and Islamophobic diatribes, accepting propaganda trips to Israel, and sternly shutting down nationalist forces challenging his support for Israel during TPUSA events. In the Trump era, few American Gentiles had proved more valuable to the self-proclaimed Jewish state than Charlie Kirk. But as Israel's genocidal assault on the besieged Gaza Strip drove an unprecedented backlash within grassroots right-wing circles, where only 24% of the younger Republicans now sympathize with Israel over the Palestinians, Kirk began to shift. At times, he toed the Israeli line, spreading disinformation about babies beheaded by Hamas on October 7th and denying the famine imposed on the population of Gaza. Yet he simultaneously ceded to his base, wondering aloud if Jeffrey Epstein was an Israeli intelligence asset, questioning whether the Israeli government allowed the October 7 attacks to proceed in order to advance long-term political goals and parody narratives familiar to his most vociferous critic on the right, streamer Nick Fuentes. This July, at his TPUSA Student Action Summit, Kirk provided a forum for the right-wing grassroots to vent its fury about Israel's political hammerlock on the Trump administration. There, speakers from former Fox News stalwarts Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly to the anti-Zionist Jewish comedian Dave Smith, that was who I was talking about, denounced Israel's blood-soaked assault on the besieged Gaza Strip, branded Jeffrey Epstein as an Israeli intelligence asset, and openly taunted Zionist billionaires like Bill Ackman for getting away with scams despite having no actual skills. So that's Bill Ackman. That's the man in Hamptons who try to intimidate Charlie Kirk. So remember, TPUSA got some of its first donations, its money to fund its movement and its goal. It's an organization from the Zionist people. So Charlie Kirk, I mean, they felt they were being betrayed. So I like this because right here he posts on his article on this Gray Zone website. So there's this person, I guess, with a following on, it's ACYN, following on Twitter. It says, Tucker, a quote from Tucker: "How do you come to a place where some of the least impressive, most useless people who have no actual skills become billionaires? How did Bill Ackman get $9 billion? A pretty impressive guy. I know him. No."
They're getting rewarded for it. The unfairness of it drives you crazy. And it's particularly galling in the case of Jeffrey Epstein and the whole constellation of people around Jeffrey Epstein, all of whom seem to be getting away with scams. And how do you know they're getting away with scams? I'll tell you how, because they're useless and they're rich. So how do you come to a place where some of the least impressive, most useless people who have no actual skills become billionaires? How's that legitimate? And by the way, if you ask this question, at least in Washington, it's like, oh, well, yeah, it sounds like you're a socialist. Sounds like socialism. Yeah, okay, I'm a socialist now. All right. I was a Qatari agent or a bigot. Now I'm a socialist. All right. Leaving aside my committed socialism, can you answer the question? How did Bill Ackman get $9 billion? Bill Ackman, a pretty impressive guy? I know Bill Ackman. No. Bill Ackman's like well-connected and super aggressive. That's it. And I think, well-connected, super aggressive people deserve a fair living like everybody else. But if you're accruing $9 million just because you're willing to do anything, I don't know why we have to pretend that's good.
So this was posted by this guy, ACYN, in July 11th, 2025. So following the confab, Kirk was bombarded with infuriated text messages and phone calls from Netanyahu's wealthy allies in the U.S., including many who had funded TPUSA. According to his longtime friend, the Zionist donors treated Kirk with outright contempt, essentially ordering him to fall back into line. So the source says he was being told what you're not allowed to do, and it was driving him crazy, Kirk's friend recalled. The conservative youth leader was not only alienated by the hostile nature of the interactions, but frightened by the backlash. The friend's account dovetails with those of multiple right-wing commentators with access to Kirk. I think in the end, Charlie was going through a spiritual transformation. She says that Candace Owens, a conservative influencer who shifted decisively against Israel after October 7th, reflected after her friend's killing. I know it. He was going through a lot. There was a lot of pressure, and it's hard for me to watch the people who were pressuring him just say the things that they're saying. She continued, they wanted him to lose everything for changing or even slightly modifying an opinion. It's very hurtful to me. Kirk appeared visibly outraged during an August 6th interview with conservative host Megyn Kelly as he discussed the menacing messages he was receiving from pro-Israel bigwigs. So what just reported by what they just quoted from Candace Owens, and also that interview or that talk with him and Megyn Kelly is all on YouTube. It's all of a sudden, I guess these are Charlie's words and quotes. It's all of a sudden, oh, Charlie, he's no longer with us. Wait a second, what does with us mean exactly? I'm an American, okay? I represent this country, he explained, before addressing the powerful Zionist interest harassing him. The more that you guys privately and publicly call our character into question, which is not isolated, it would be one thing if it were just one text or two texts. It's dozens of texts. Then we start to say, whoa, hold the boat here, Kirk continued. To be fair, some really good Jewish friends say that's not all of us, but these are leaders here. These are stakeholders. He went on to complain to Kelly, I have less ability to criticize the Israeli government than actual Israelis do, and that's really, really weird. In one of his final interviews conducted with Israel's premier influencer in the United States, Ben Shapiro, Kirk once again tried to raise the issue of censorship of Israel critics. A friend said to me, interestingly, Charlie, okay, we've pushed back against the media on COVID, on lockdowns, on Ukraine, on the border. Kirk told Shapiro on September 9th, maybe we should also ask the question, is the media totally presenting the truth when it comes to Israel? Just the question. So this is by Hats Off on Twitter, a post on September 11th, 2025. Charlie Kirk's now final interview, he criticized Israel to Ben Shapiro's face.
Charlie, we've pushed back against the media on COVID, on lockdowns, on Ukraine, on the border, on so like maybe we should also ask a question: is the media totally presenting the truth when it comes to Israel? Just a question, that maybe we shouldn't believe everything the media says, because I know I've been conditioned to ask a lot more critical questions over the last couple of years. So, Ben, some people would accuse Israel of wanting to ethnically cleanse. Some people in the Israeli government are saying, again, it's all over the place, right? You have opinions all over. In your opinion, what would a good outcome 5 years from now be, and how does one respond to the claims of ethnic cleansing?
According to Kirk's longtime friend, Kirk's resentment of Netanyahu and the Israel lobby was spreading within Trump's inner circle. In fact, they said the president himself was terrified of Netanyahu's wrath and feared the consequences of defying him. During the past year, the Trump insider was told by contacts in the White House that the Secret Service had caught Israeli government personnel placing electronic devices on its emergency response vehicles on two separate occasions. While the Gray Zone was unable to confirm the story with the Secret Service or White House, such an incident would not have been unprecedented. Indeed, according to a report in Politico citing three former senior U.S. officials, a cell phone spying device was placed by Israeli agents near the White House and other sensitive locations around Washington toward the end of Trump's first term in 2019. Former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson recounted a similar incident in his memoir, writing that his security team found a listening device in his bathroom soon after Netanyahu used his personal toilet. The Israel did it theory. Kirk was killed on September 10th with a single shot fired by a sniper apparently positioned on a rooftop 20 meters away. He was shot while seated before a crowd of thousands at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah on the first leg of his American comeback tour. The scene of Kirk collapsing from the impact of a gunshot to his neck just as he began answering the question about transgender mass shooters was perhaps the most shockingly vivid spectacle of assassination and certainly the most viral in human history. There was currently no evidence of an Israeli government role in Kirk's assassination. However, that has not stopped thousands of social media users from speculating that the pro-Trump operatives' shifting views on the issue contributed in some way to his death. By the time of publication, over 100,000 Twitter/X users have liked a September 11th post by libertarian influencer Ian Carroll declaring about Kirk he was their friend. He basically dedicated his life to them, and they murdered him in front of his family. Israel just shot themselves. So by the time of publication, I guess, of this article, over 100,000 Twitter/X users have liked a September 11th post by libertarian influencer Ian Carroll declaring about Kirk he was their friend. He basically dedicated his life to them and they murdered him in front of his family. Israel just shot themselves. Many advancing the substantiated theory have pointed to a Twitter X post by Harrison Smith, a personality at the pro-Trump InfoWars network, stating on August 13th, almost a month before Kirk's assassination, that he was told by someone close to Charlie Kirk that Kirk thinks Israel will kill him if he turns against Israel. The frenzied speculation has set off shockwaves in Tel Aviv, where Netanyahu was compelled to explicitly deny that his government killed Kirk during a September 11th interview with Newsmax. So Jackson Hinkle, with an American flag next to his Twitter name. So right here, alert, Israel flag, USA. Breaking, Netanyahu claims Israel did not assassinate Charlie Kirk. What an odd thing for a world leader who was busy bombing 7 countries to say. I've seen this. This is on YouTube.
I want you to address one thing, and it's just the absurdity of it. Some of the internet rumors that somehow Israel is behind the Charlie Kirk murder, and I don't believe it for 1 second. But I want you to make a statement.
That looks like a weirdo.
That's insane. That's insane. Israel also changes.
He just looks weird. I don't know if they did it, but he just looks weird.
Israel pushes the sun. I mean, the whole thing is, it's not only insane, it's, I think it's so absurd, so stupid, and so ridiculous. You can't believe that people are saying that they just found the perpetrator. They'll get to the bottom of this, but they go, they have no limits. When you hate Jews, when you hate the Jewish state, you're willing to say anything and promote all these absurd rumors. And by the way, they're willing to kill us all the time. I mean, that's what they're doing. And over the centuries, when Jews, especially in the Middle Ages, the horrific Middle Ages, the worst things were said about Jews you couldn't possibly believe. We were poisoning the wells. We were drinking the blood of Christian children. You name it. I mean, these things, that continued actually up to the Holocaust. The Nazis said the same thing. We're carrying vermin. We're spreading disease. And people believed it. And every time they believed it, this was a prelude to a greater and greater massacre, culminating with the worst massacre of them all, the Holocaust. Well, since then, we've learned, when people spread these lies about us, prepare yourself for the assault. And, they're trying to delegitimize the state of Israel. Charlie Kirk said to me that he wrote me this detailed letter. You have to fight the slander. These untruths, these vilifications have consequences. And he was right. But I'll tell you one thing, we're fighting on the battlefield against the terrorists and winning. And he was fighting on the battlefield of ideas. And I think he was winning. He was going to win. That's why they shot him. I hope they don't silence him. I don't think people will give in to these ridiculous lies.
As I was hearing that was a good response by him. But just wait and see for the evidence. If we believe it for our friends, or we demand evidence for our friends, we should respect it for our enemies. Not to say he's an enemy, I'm just saying. I hope this some other foreign country doesn't have influence over our nation? Well, unfortunately, with that lobbying loophole, it's going to happen. So Netanyahu and his allies bury the Kirk crisis as Big Tent collapses. That appearance was just one of several interviews and statements the Prime Minister dedicated to Kirk in the wake of his killing in an effort to frame the late conservative leader's legacy in a uniformly pro-Israel light. The major public relations push has occurred while Netanyahu wages a military campaign on 7 fronts, punctuated by a regional assassination spree that most recently reached into the heart of Qatar, a U.S. ally. Netanyahu first tweeted prayers for Kirk at 3:02 p.m. in the afternoon on September 10th, minutes after news of the shooting broke. He has since authored 3 additional posts about Kirk, even breaking away from the Israeli war cabinet to spend the afternoon of September 11th memorializing the conservative leader on Fox News. During that interview, Netanyahu did his best to insinuate that Israel's enemies were responsible for murdering Kirk, despite the fact that no suspect was named or in custody at the time. This is his quotes. The radical Islamists and their union with the ultra-progressives, they often speak about human rights. They speak about free speech, but they use violence to try to take down their enemies, the Prime Minister told Harris Faulkner. In a September 10th Twitter X post eulogizing the conservative leader, the Israeli Prime Minister described a recent phone conversation with Kirk. I spoke to him only 2 weeks ago and invited him to Israel, Netanyahu declared. Sadly, that visit will not take place. So one of Netanyahu's own tweets, Charlie Kirk was murdered for speaking truth and defending freedom. A lion-hearted friend of Israel, he fought the lies and stood tall for Judeo-Christian civilization. I spoke to him only 2 weeks ago and invited him to Israel. Sadly, that visit will not take place. We lost. I guess it still goes, but I'm sure I don't have Twitter on my phone. That was 2:21 p.m. September 10th. Left unmentioned was whether Kirk declined the invitation, just as he did with the Prime Minister's offer to reload TPUSA's coffers with donations from his coterie of wealthy American Jewish cutouts. At the time of publication, a 22-year-old resident of Utah has been taken into custody after supposedly confessing to killing Kirk. The public may soon learn the true motives of the alleged assassin. Perhaps they will fuel the narrative which Trump and his allies advanced in the immediate wake of the shooting, that a leftist radical is responsible and that a wave of draconian repression must follow. But after the shooter's initial escape and a series of federal law enforcement mishaps, a larger sector of A large sector of Americans will likely never believe the official story, nor will they ever know where Kirk's turning point on Israel would have taken the conservative movement. 4 days before the assassination, frustration among pro-Israel commentators bubbled over in the public during an Fox News interview in which Ben Shapiro launched a chilling attack on Kirk without naming him. So 4 days before the assassination, frustration among pro-Israel commentators bubbled over in public during a Fox News interview in which Ben Shapiro launched a chilling attack on Kirk without naming him. The problem with a big tent is that you may end up with many clowns inside, Shapiro told Fox host and fellow Zionist gatekeeper Mark Levin in an apparent critique of Turning Point USA. Just because you're saying somebody votes Republican, that doesn't mean that they ought to be the preacher at the front of the church. They're not the person that ought to be leading the movement if they are spending all day criticizing the president of the United States as covering up a Mossad rape ring or being a tool of the Israeli for hitting an Iranian nuclear facility. When Kirk took his usual place at the front of the church 4 days later, he was cut down by a sniper's bullet that was obviously in quotes as sarcasm to Ben Shapiro's quotes. When Kirk took his usual place at the front of the church 4 days later, he was cut down by a sniper's bullet. Within 24 hours of Kirk's death, Shapiro announced that he would be launching his own campus speaking tour, vowing, "We're going to pick up that blood-stained microphone where Charlie left it." I think Ben Shapiro needs to back the fuck up. I think even just knowing that nobody likes you and that we're America first and not Israeli, we might be friends or cordial, but if I was him, I'd say, no, I'm going to separate myself until it all blows over. Dude, this morning, today is the 16th, September 16th. Supposedly the right hand man of Charlie Kirk sitting at the center. They left Charlie Kirk's chair open. This is a Charlie Kirk show, the Charlie Kirk podcast show. They had Matt Walsh, they had Ben Shapiro, that's some other dude, and they had some guy who's, I don't know too much about this movement. I would watch his videos on YouTube. Before I knew who Charlie Kirk was, I go to Rio Hondo College in Whittier, California. They had one beautiful young lady, an American, trying to start a chapter at my school. She was by herself. Me and only maybe a handful of people acknowledged her in a pro-American light. She gave us some pins. Look, I got a pin right here. Socialism sucks. The socialism that we know thus far sucks throughout its history. And we live in an imperfect world. But for Ben Shapiro to say this and to be on Charlie Kirk's podcast today, and they were on live, I went to go run a couple errands. About an hour later, that live is not up. The uploader took it down. That's a slap in the face of Charlie Kirk. And shame on you, his right-hand man, to even allow that. Shame on you. You got pressured. Someone's putting fear in you. The same people who probably were putting intimidation into Charlie Kirk. Not saying that they're the ones who killed him. But Occam's razor, right? Let the simplest explanation might be the truth. And I don't know. Rest in peace to Charlie Kirk, but shame on you, to the right-hand man of Charlie Kirk. Shame on you for allowing Ben Shapiro on that show for what he said. I would have said, no, we're not doing no show. We're not doing a show. We're not doing a show. I can't do that to my friend. And I don't know. Can't say nothing about Charlie Kirk's wife or give an opinion on it because I don't know what she's going through. Maybe I shouldn't give an opinion on that right-hand man, but maybe he was ambitious himself. Maybe he thinks he has a right to take over. Maybe, well, Charlie Kirk would have given me the blessing. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know. I can only ask, can a heart really be 100% pure? I don't know. So when Kirk took his anyway, so within 24 hours of Kirk's death, Shapiro announced that he would be launching his own. I'm at the end. Max Blumenthal, editor-in-chief, the editor-in-chief of the Gray Zone. He is an award-winning journalist and the author of several books, including best-selling Republican Gomorrah, Republican Gomorrah, like Sodom and Gomorrah, the Republican Gomorrah, Goliath, the 51-Day War, and the Management of Savagery. Has produced print articles for an array of publications, many video reports, and several documentaries, including Killing Gaza. Blumenthal founded the Gray Zone in 2015 to shine a journalistic light on America's state of perpetual war and its dangerous domestic repercussions. Anya Parampil is a journalist based in Washington, D.C. She has produced and reported several documentaries, including on-the-ground reports from the Korean Peninsula, Palestine, Venezuela, and Honduras. Shame on you, Shapiro, being on his show. There was I think, a link to this comeback tour. He's a lame. Let's see your fucking comeback tour.
You think you're fine after a car
So let's see what Ben Shapiro said, because the link to this video.
Welcome back, America. We're here with our good friend Ben Shapiro. By the way, he's written a fantastic new book, Lions and Scavengers, The True Story of America and Her Critics. But before we get to that, Ben Shapiro, I opened the program with a clip of Tlaib, who is, of course, detestable. But she was at this conference, People's Conference for Palestine 2025, Detroit. And you had a real variety of terror-supporting individuals, people with ties to terrorism, people promoting the extinction of the United States, had people who we thought
strain on the left that says for themselves they have no on a weird horse America.
I think there's enough of an effort. They sort of sprinkle these events with these kooks, these weekend events, these seminars, whether they're for young people or think tanks or that sort of thing. They sort of sprinkle these events with these kooks. They sprinkle these events with these American haters who claim to be American firsters and are fake MAGA and even stab the president in the back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely an attempt by some of these organizations to quote unquote maintain the big tent. But the reality is that, as many have said, the problem with a big tent is that you may end up with many, many clowns inside. And the most fundamental thing is that just because you're saying somebody votes Republican, that does not mean that they ought to be the preacher at the front of the church. They're not the person who ought to be leading the movement if they are spending all day criticizing the president of the United States as covering up a Mossad rape ring or being a tool of the Israelis for hitting an Iranian nuclear facility, a thing he has said literally his entire career that he was going to do. And so it seems to me that if we are to hold anything in sort of reverence, it ought to be the fundamental tenets of the American Republic, which I believe to reside in conservatism. And if conservative organizations are simply going to give up the ghost on that in order to maintain a sort of pseudo coalition, that is a gigantic moral and political mistake.
I even looked at one organization this week that's having a big
Look at him. He looks kind of evil, huh?
They're sprinkling these kooks in with other people.
How is it a moral mistake or a political mistake? If it's a
rational think groups.
If it's a political mistake, politics it walks a thin line with violence. Politics walks a thin line with violence. American political figures have been getting murdered, and Charlie Kirk is a perfect example.
A think tank.
When you have weak people like this, like a Ben Shapiro, he's weak. Physically, he's weak, but he's not. Him morally, he's not weak. Him in a group, he's not weak, because he's a perfect person. A lot of groups are filled with weak people, but numbers are powerful, and that's him. Blood, sweat, and tears. He's gonna ride with his people. That's what he's doing. Go watch this for yourself, guys. Ben Shapiro, this is a gigantic mistake. Fox News with Ben Levin or Steve Levin.